Program Legends of Our Time. On Legends of Our Time, we talk to our heroes who impact our society positively. My name is Gifty Eji, and of course today I have one such personality I'll be talking to in a jiffy. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, I'll introduce my guest for today. Legends of Our Time on GBC News and Ghana Television. My name is Gifty Eji, and of course my guest for today is Professor Kwamena Ahwoi, the local governance expert. Prof, thank you so much for the honor.
Thank you.
Indeed, we are so grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us in your home. You have a very beautiful home.
Well, if you say so.
Yeah, it's nice. Thank you. My first question, why do you always put on the hat? Any special
It's
reason?
a long story, but I'll cut it short.
Okay.
So, in the period of the revolution, I used to have a very bushy beard, very, very long. I used to shave once a year. On my 40th birthday, when we were about to enter the constitutional era, I decided to do away with the beard. But politician, you need some identifying mark.
Sure.
So I thought that a hat to replace the beard would be in order.
That's
so that's when I
interesting.
started wearing the hat.
So how many hats do you have on the average?
Oh, right now maybe just about only about 140.
140
They're
hats.
in my garage, hanging on the wall. We can inspect them when we finish.
That's interesting. Yes. That's interesting. Thank you. So tell us your roots. Fanti or Sishi?
My mother is from the central region, Agona East District in particular, a small village called the Agona Mankomo.
Okay.
And my father is a Sifi, again from a small village called Sifi Ahibensu in the Bodi district
Bodi.
of the present Western North region. Yes. So I am half-half.
Oh, okay. I also learned you come from a very large family. You have about 7 siblings. And how was it growing up in such a large family?
It was tough. 6 of us are from one father, and when he died, very long ago, our mother had 2 girls with another man, and she more or less brought us up as a single mother, and it wasn't very easy. We were living in Kumasi at the time, but she was a tough woman, and she managed.
She managed, and all of you went to school?
Not just went to school, every one of us has a university degree, all of 8 of us, including the one who died. So had a university degree.
And also growing up, I heard this, the Ahwoi brothers. What's the story behind it?
No, there's no real story behind it. You know, the 3 of us entered the revolution in 1982. And it was very unusual for 3 brothers, biological brothers, same mother, same father, to be in the same government and then in the same political party. And because I believe we are very good at what we do, you know, wherever we found ourselves, we left a name. And that gives birth to the legend of the Ahwoi brothers.
Ahwoi brothers. That's good to know. Let's look at your educational background. Did you begin from Kumasi or?
Yes, I was actually born in Winneba, but I was taken to Kumasi. My father was working with the Department of Social Welfare. She was transferred to Kumasi in 1952. I was born in 1951. So I moved to Kumasi and was brought up almost entirely in Kumasi. I started my primary school at a very famous school called South Suntreso, Seventh-day Adventist mixed primary school. Then I continued at South Suntreso Local Authority Mixed Middle School. I did my O-level at the Kwamena Secondary School at Ekopongo Krapo, and went back to Kumasi to do my 6th form at the Kukwari Secondary School. And then I entered the Faculty of Law at the University of Ghana, where I did my Bachelor of Laws degree. And then proceeded to Oxford University in the UK on a Rhodes Scholarship to do my master's there. They call it the BCL, Bachelor of Civil Law. And from then I came back to lecture at the University of Ghana.
So whilst in school, did it ever cross your mind that someday you will become, I mean, a national asset?
No, actually.
Were you that bright, a grade A student, average or average?
I was very bright.
Okay.
In fact, all my siblings, we are all very, very bright.
Okay.
In my year at the University of Ghana, the law faculty, the year I graduated, I was the only one who got a second upper class. Nobody got a first class. So in the elementary school, we would say, "Menamidi first." You know, and you know, if you know anything about the Rhodes Scholarship,
Okay.
it is one of the most prestigious scholarships in the world. You know, people like President Bill Clinton and others, all of them went to Oxford on the Rhodes Scholarship. So to say that you are a Rhodes scholar is really to say that you are among the best of the best.
Chabri.
Yes. So as for that, I mean, it's a fact, and all my mates, they know that for a fact, yes.
Okay, so after the completion of your school, you went into lecturing. I mean, did you become a lecturer because you wanted to become a teacher, or just by chance?
No, actually, when I finished at Oxford, I got a job at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also one at the Faculty of Law. At that time, the Faculty of Law, or the University of Ghana generally, was getting very depleted of lecturers. You know, that was the period of the exodus to Nigeria, the Agege exodus. And so the dean of the faculty at the time, Professor Echo Daniels, put in a special plea that I should come back and help out, because there was a particular subject that very few lecturers wanted to teach, jurisprudence. It was only Chachu Chikata who was teaching it. So he asked me to come and join Chachu to teach it. So I had a choice between Legon and Foreign Ministry. I didn't like travel too much, and I still don't like traveling too much.
Okay.
And I knew that in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because of postings, I would be doing a lot of traveling. So in university, there's no transfer. Once you are there, you are stuck. So I decided to take the Legon appointment and then get stuck there.
Okay.
So that's how it happened.
That's how it happened. Now, let's look at your transition from the classroom into politics. I mean, how many years now? Almost 3 decades.
1982, so about 38 years.
Have you regretted in any way?
Some regrets, but on the whole, no regrets. The only thing I want to say is that I didn't consciously choose to go into politics. In fact, I got into politics by peradventure. In 1979, when the elections, the Third Republic elections were about to take place, Dr. now Professor Ivan Adai-Mensah, who later became the Vice Chancellor, he was a GTV's lead interviewer for their intellectual programs. And GTV had decided to interview the presidential candidates for the 1979 elections. And he was to do the interviews. He was a very good friend. I had just come back from Oxford about a year. And we belonged to the Legon Scrabble Club. He was to do the interview. But just around that time, he was appointed the General Secretary of the PNP, the People's National Party, which was President Hilary Liman's party, the party that won the elections. Now, because of that, obviously there was a conflict of interest. So he opted out of the interviews. And then apparently informed the GTV officials that he thought I would be a good replacement. So they came to me, my house, as you have come to my house now, and lobbied me into doing the interviews. I did. And it was a sensational event. I mean, it caught on very well. And I became quite famous.
Okay.
This was just around the time of the June 4th, 1979 uprising, which shot Jerry into prominence. The elections themselves were held on 18th in April. 18th June.
Okay.
But the handover to President Liman took place on 24th September. So by the time the elections took place, I had become a fairly well-known figure because GTV had broadcasted, etc. And so when 4th June took place, GTV wanted to interview Chairman Rollins of the AFRs. And the only condition he gave them was that he would only agree to the interview if it was to be done by that young law lecturer who interviewed the presidential candidate.
Wow.
So they brought an OB van
Okay.
to Burma camp, and we did a 2-hour interview, which also went very, very well. And that's how I got to know him. That was the first time that I met him. And then we became friends and comrades. So when he did his 31st, he actually announced me on air as one of 10 people who should report at Gonda Barracks. And when I reported, I got stuck in the revolution, and therefore in politics.
In politics. But this question I want to read directly to you. So from various accounts, the 1981 revolution was extremely popular with students and staff of various universities, especially those from the University of Ghana, Legon, where you belonged. You, yourself, and others, including Honorable E.T. Mensah, Dr. Kwesi Boche, Lawyer Chachuchi Kata, Mr. P.V. Obeng, and Prof. Mills of blessed memory. So kindly tell us the attraction which pulled so many of the best brains at the time to join the revolution, period.
Well, before the revolution, we were revolutionaries on campus. We were known as the campus leftists. Politically, we were left of center. And so we tended towards socialism, and even some of us, this extreme form of Marxism. But all we were doing was talking, debating, sermonizing. Now, when Jerry came on the scene, it was clear that he was not very comfortable with the theory.
Okay.
He wanted action. So theory and action, or theory and practice met. And therefore he carried us along. At that time, I would say not so much of Professor Mills. He was also a leftist, but he was not political. And P.V. Obeng was also from KNUST. But the rest of those you have mentioned were all in Legon. And we belonged to an organization called NDM, New Democratic Movement, which was a platform that we used to do public education, organize public fora to educate the people about scientific socialism and why it was necessary for us to implement some leftist programs as opposed to the extreme right-wing policies that the previous governments were practicing, etc. So we and Jerry found ourselves as very comfortable bedfellows, and we joined together to prosecute the revolution.
And that was it. And despite, it's obvious that the PNDC government had the advantage of working with very good people. What would you say was the greatest impact of all these brains working for the administration at one go?
Well, I think the best answer I could give you is that it taught us that theory and practice were very often poles apart. Because in talking theory, you assume all things being equal. In practice, in the real world, things are never equal.
Sure.
So what you think may work in theory may not necessarily work in practice. So for me, the greatest impact we had was the fact that it took us, leftists who were in favor of state control of the economy, to turn the economy around into a market economy. We were the ones who put an end to the language of devaluation by starting with something that we call bonuses and surcharges, where exporters were granted a bonus and importers suffered a surcharge, in order to stabilize the currency. And so we had two windows at the time, and then we unified it at a certain point and put an end to devaluation, and therefore got the currency to be determined by the market, more or less. Foreign exchange, which you people take for granted today, was not available. you had to have a Bank of Ghana transfer approval before you could either buy or sell foreign currency. Foreign currency was sell. There was a place in Accra called Zongo Lane. That's where that's what the foreign currency was. It was sold. So now it became available. The reigning economic language at the time was one of hoarding, profiteering, selling above control price. These were all made into criminal offenses. I mean, let me tell you, for example, what
Please do.
hoarding was defined in a law that was known as Subversion Decree, NRC Decree 90. Hoarding was defined as being in possession of goods in excess of your immediate requirements. So you, for example, if you are a single young girl and you had about 6 tins of milk, obviously you are not going to drink 6 tins of milk immediately. So you have it in excess of your immediate requirements. You are going to jail.
Wow.
Oh, yes. During budget time, the Minister of Finance will spend about 1 hour reading out the prices of items, milk, cocoa, sardine, etc., etc. And if you sold 1 peso above that price, you were going to jail. That was selling above control price. Profiteering. I'm sure you grew up to hear kalabule. Kalabule. Goods were in short supply. And therefore, you could only get the little goods available if you had a cheat. So if you knew a minister or a commissioner, you give you a cheat. Then you would sell the cheat to a second person, you would sell the cheat to a third person, all at a profit. So if you got the cheat from the minister at a price of, say, 10 cedis, by the time it got to the person who would actually go to take delivery of the goods, he's taking delivery at about 150, 200 cedis. And that extortionate profit was what was referred to as kalabule. We were the ones who were able to put a stop to all of that by converting the state-controlled economy into a market-run economy. And as I said, it was not going to be easy for any other group of people to have been able to do that, because we were known as leftists, as statists. It was like people were saying, oh, if these people are saying we must go this route, then it must be the right route to go. I think that helped us. That helped us a lot. Another area that we made an impact, I think, was decentralization. But we said
we'll come there.
We'll talk about that later. And then I think that the third and final area that we made, I should say, the greatest impact is the 1992 Constitution. When we made our proposals for the Constitution, even some people boycotted it. The Bar Association boycotted it. The Consultative Assembly, the NUCs boycotted it, because they said we had brought in butchers and market women and hairdressers to come and write a constitution.
But was that the case?
Yes, it was the case. It was the case. And
why that move or decision?
Oh, before that,
okay,
let me explain the impact to you.
Okay.
This is the only post-independence constitution that has survived one government. We are now in the 7th government of the Fourth
Republic.
The First Republic constitution was overthrown. The second was overthrown after 2.5 years. The third was overthrown after 2 years and 3 months. And then this is the 4th. And it has lasted. There must be something to say for why it has lasted. We did an analysis that showed that when you put in just lawyers, etc., to write a constitution, the people are divorced from the constitution. They don't know what is in it. They don't know what it is about, etc. So we wanted a way for the people to own the constitution, what we call the people's constitution. And the only way they were going to be able to own it was if they participated in the writing of the constitution, if they understood, what the constitution stood for and what was in it for them. I'm not surprised, therefore, that the constitution has lasted, because the ordinary people are afraid even to talk of coup d'etats now, because they don't know how people are going to react. They see the constitution as their constitution, and who knows, if you are tempted, maybe they are the ones who will resist, not even a military counterforce that will resist. So the success of the Fourth Republic is a major legacy and a major impact that the PNDC has made on this country.
Okay, Prof. Ahwoi, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, there's a lot more to talk about, okay. So hold on your fire. Well, the program is Legends of Our Time on GBC News and Ghana Television on Legends of Our Time. We celebrate our gems. So we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion with Professor Kwamena Ahwoi. Please stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're still watching Legends of Our Time on GBC News and Ghana Television on Legends of Our Time. We celebrate our heroes, and of course today I am in discussion with one key personality like that, and he is Professor Kwamena Ahwoi, the man accredited with Ghana's decentralization drive. My name is Gifty Eji. I'll go back to him and then we'll continue with the discussion. Don't go away. So, Prof, despite all that you talked about being the impact or the success of the era, people still have this, bitterness and then skepticism about the whole period. What do you say to that?
Well, there were obviously excesses during the period, but we were trying to change a system, we were trying to change a culture, we were trying to change an attitude. Change is always very difficult. It is like making an omelette. You cannot make an omelette without breaking the egg, So if you want to make such a fundamental change, by all means, some things will be broken. So there were certain things that were done that maybe we could have done differently. There were people who took advantage of the revolution to go on flourishes of their own and exact, vengeance from people that they had issues with. So all of those things, and therefore some people suffered. Some people were at the receiving end of the revolution. And therefore, by all means, those people will harbor bitterness. And therefore, it will be amounting to historical inexactitude. If anyone should say that all was rosy in the revolutionary period, no, all was not rosy. But arising out of that period, I'm saying that certain very positive issues, indicators have arisen, which have put the country on the right track towards democratic governance, which I think all of us are now talking positively about today.
But then with the excesses that you mentioned, is there a way we can kind of solve it?
Well, the material excesses you can solve. In fact, in the PNDC, we solved some of it because I was convener of a PNDC reconciliation committee that worked from 1984 to 1987. That dealt especially with the excesses of the AFRC era. The people who were sentenced to long terms of imprisonment were pardoned. People who had gone into exile were allowed to return. And then the PNP officials who had also gone into exile were also allowed to return. So those parts, the AFRC and large parts of the PNDC era matters were dealt with. And when President Kufuor came, he also set up the parliamentary, the National Reconciliation Commission through an act of parliament. And that also did some work, and some compensation was paid to people who suffered, etc. And that's why I'm saying that the material excesses, that one, I think to a large extent have been dealt with. But the mental, emotional excesses, that one is not something that anybody can deal with. But if you are not a good Christian, you say, okay, I will forgive, but I will not forget. Or I will forget, but I will not forgive. I think that is what is letting the so-called excesses linger on for a very long time.
But as members of the PNDC, I mean, you were the leaders. Have you also taken the steps to probably apologize to the people so that they can also say, okay, we've let go and then let the matter die naturally?
Well, I don't know whether apology is the right way, but I know that in several of President Chairman and later President Rawlings's State of the Nation addresses, he did extend an olive branch to all those who he thought we had offended. It will not be possible for me to come to you as an individual. I was in charge of the public tribunals, etc. I can't come to you and say, I'm sorry that I had you prosecuted. You deserve to be prosecuted. You know? It's like asking a judge to go and apologize to a thief for putting him in. So as for that one-on-one thing, it's very difficult. But I think that as a system, sufficient apologies have been rendered on behalf of the PNDC.
Okay. I'm curious, you know, those entrenched clauses in the Constitution, why were they kept there?
I don't think you mean entrenched clauses. I suspect that you mean the indemnity clauses. Indemnity clauses. Yes. Why were they kept there? Why were they put in?
Yes.
You know, when the people have overthrown a government, they know that they have committed treason, for which the punishment is death. So when you want them, especially the military, to hand over, you have to negotiate for their safety and survival.
Okay.
If you don't do it, then you have to fight them to take over power. Because they know that if they are not protected, of course, they will be charged with treason and they will be sentenced and maybe put to death. So it is a matter of political pragmatism that when a coup has taken place and you want the coup makers to hand over, you have indemnity clauses that will protect the people who participated in the coup. You know, this matter comes up because people always have Jerry Rawlings in mind. What they forget is that the indemnity clause covers all those who worked with the coup makers. Because if you stage a coup, it is not only the coup maker who is guilty, the people who work with the coup maker are also guilty of treason. So if the indemnity clauses were not there, not only Jerry would be put on trial, I will be on trial. You won't be here sitting, chatting with him. President Kufuor will be on trial. In fact, he will be on trial before me. Because he was appointed as PNDC secretary before me. You know? So it's a really murky area. Sometimes when I hear people talk about it, I say, these are dangerous waters that people want to go and wade in. And it doesn't just stop at the PNDC. The AFRC coup makers, the coup makers who overthrew Prime Minister Kofi Abdul-Buzia, and even those who overthrew Kwamena, if some of them are still alive, they will all be liable to be tried for treason if these indemnity clauses were not there. So people may not like it, people may not think it is the best, but as I said, it is a matter of political pragmatism. If we didn't do it, I don't think we would have had a peaceful and smooth transition from a revolution to constitution.
Civilian rule.
Yeah.
That's it. But today, today we are in a democratic era. Can we remove it from the constitution? Because there have been times people have been advocating for it.
Yes, but that's the answer I'm giving you. If you remove it, it means we should be tried.
Okay.
Because the moment you remove it, the indemnity, the immunity that we enjoy is gone. And therefore, all those of us who participated are going to have to be put on trial. That's why, you know, it is best, in countries where this has happened, it is best to let them be there. With the passage of time, the people who are benefiting from those immunity, they will die. So when the last of them dies, those indemnity clauses will become meaningless. Then you can remove them. But for as long as some of them are alive, I don't think it is advisable that they should be touched.
So in our case, like from where you say, like, how many years before we can let
I don't
go
know when I will die. I don't know when. And there are people who were younger than me who were involved in the revolution. It's like asking me to predict when we will die. I don't know.
Over the next 100 or 200 years.
I don't know.
That's interesting. Okay, so let's come to your area. I mean, your the decentralization or local governance. When you talk about this area in Ghana, that is Professor Kwamena Ahwoi. At what point did the idea drop that Ghana should, go towards that path of governance?
The idea to decentralize came up very early in the revolution. In fact, in a document that was released by the PNDC in May 1982, called the PNDC Policy Guidelines. That was where the first commitment to decentralization
and who
was made.
proposed that policy?
It was a group of PNDC secretaries. The ministers then were called PNDC secretaries. And we met and put together the policy positions in the various sectors. So that document actually contained the PNDC's policy positions in all the sectors, among which was local government. And in the local government sector, a commitment was made to decentralization. Now, from 1982 until 1987, not much was done to advance decentralization. But the period was used to do the demarcation and the redemarcation of the country into the local government units. And so the idea of the unit committees, for example, the zones, the urban areas, the towns, the areas, they were all born out during this period.
Correct.
It took that long because, demarcation involves a lot of very delicate matters. Let me just give you two examples.
Okay, please do.
You have as a criterion that a district should have a minimum population of 75,000, which is what we have. You have a traditional area whose population is 55,000. So they wouldn't qualify
as a district.
So you want to add another traditional area, in order to reach the minimum of 75,000. These two traditional areas are very hostile to each other. and in under no circumstance would they agree to be under the same political authority. So you have to consult and talk and promise and do a lot of things before, in some cases it took years. So we devised a number of measures. For example, at the beginning of the decentralization, you found districts with very long names, like Commander Edena Iguafu Abrim, Jumako Inyan Isiem, Tondon Kumbungu, Saboba Trepane, etc. Any time you heard those names, it meant two ethnic groups who did not want to come together had been forced to come together, or two or three traditional areas who did not want to come together had been forced to come together. And one of the conditions they insisted on was that their name should be in the name of the district. So it was an interesting but difficult period. But that was what basically happened between 1983, I think 87. It was in 87 that decentralization gathered momentum, because that was when Chairman Rawlings put together a team of political activists and camped us. I was one of them at Akuse, the VRA facilities Akuse. So the group became known as the Akuse Group, and we were tasked to come out with a blueprint for decentralized governance. So we came out with a small booklet. The official title was District Political Authorities and Modalities for District Level Elections. the cover was blue.
And it
So
became
the media immediately named it the Blue Book.
The Blue Book.
So after the title, it got lost. You are aware,
Oh yeah, the Blue Book.
Yeah, it became the Blue Book.
Okay.
And it was in the Blue Book that the concept of district assemblies was mentioned for the first time. And then the major features of decentralization were there for this, were put there for the first time. So at the time, Mr. Kofi Totobi Kwachi was the PNDC Secretary for Information, but he had had an accident. So I was asked, at that time I was in the Ministry of Local Government. I was a coordinator for investigations, vetting and tribunals. So I was asked to act for him. But because the Blue Book was out and the National Commission for Democracy was going on a roadshow with the Blue Book, as acting Secretary for Information, I had to accompany Justice Annan and more or less be the spokesperson for the Blue Book and defend the contents. So after we had done that, then Chairman Rollins called me and said, look, the way the Blue Book has been accepted through my mouth, I'm the only person who can implement it.
Speak to it.
Yes, so he appointed me the PNDC Secretary for Local Government
Local
in
government.
1988. The first thing I did was to have the contents of the Blue Book converted into legislation. So I chaired a task force that prepared a law that became the Local Government Law of 1988, PNDC Law 207.
Okay.
And with that, the processes for the establishment of the district assemblies began. The elections themselves were held in November, December 88, and January 89. The assemblies were inaugurated in March 89, and the business of decentralization began from there.
Today, it's been about close to 3 decades or more.
88. Yeah, it's 88, so no, 89, so yeah, about 31 years.
About 31 years.
No, so not close to it, slightly more than.
More than 3 decades. So today, when you sit behind the scenes, now that you're on pension, and then you watch a system you help, nurture, and we are still using it, how do you feel as a pioneer of that process?
I think that we have done well, but we have not done too well.
Okay.
We have not done too well because the two major parties which have been implementing the policy have not been discussing their policies. And so what is happening is that NDC comes, they implement it in one way, NPP comes, they implement it maybe in the opposite direction. And so it's been a forwards and backwards movement of decentralization.
But what should be the ideal situation in terms of implementation?
Yes, the ideal situation is that when they are making the laws, they should try and build a consensus between them. Now, because of the majoritarian positions that they take, depending on which party is in power, whichever law they take to Parliament is passed by the majority. By the minority may have very serious reservations about it, but the majoritarian view prevails, they implement it, and then when the new government comes, they try to overturn it. Let me tell you an interesting example.
Okay, please do.
Experience that I had. I was invited by the World Bank to Durban in South Africa to participate in a panel discussion on decentralization. I was with a Ugandan minister, a South African minister, and then two others who were 5. Now, when the Ugandan and the South Africans spoke, they both said, oh, they understudied Ghana's decentralization program.
Okay.
But from what they are hearing, it looks like they have overtaken Ghana. And when it got to my turn, I said, oh, actually, it is true. But I am praying for them because their governments have never changed since they started decentralization implementation. In fact, both of them, when they sent their teams to understudy our system, I was a minister. The Ugandans came in 1991. The South Africans came immediately after their independence, I think in 96. On both occasions, I was a minister. And the Ugandans were here for about 3 weeks. The South Africans were here for about 10 days. And I helped them draft their legislation and things. I said, your governments have never changed. Uganda has always had Museveni since they started decentralization and the movement system. South Africa has always had the ANC in power. So you haven't gone through the vicissitudes that we have gone through, the forwards and backwards movements. So I am praying that in all that you are doing, you have the full consent and agreement of your opposition, of the opposition in your party. Because if you are not lucky and your government's change, you may have a hard time believing that what you thought was the best for the country is not considered the best.
The best.
So for me, that is really the problem of Ghana's decentralization implementation. We need a consensus on some of the major issues. For example, when the MPP decided that they will hold a referendum to make the district assemblies partisan, it is something that they should have had a buy-in from the NDC before they made that move. A lot of money was spent, and then suddenly when they realized that it took a referendum, the NDC would not vote for yes for the referendum. The president had to pull back. Because there were many factors that had not been taken into account.
Consideration.
Let me give you just one.
Okay.
Under the current non-partisan system of local government, the district assembly elections are free. The unit committee elections are free. They don't pay deposits. The electoral commission does the posters of the candidates for them, and so on and so forth. If you are going to make the assembly system partisan, the first question you ask yourself is, are the partisan district assembly elections also going to be free, or are the parties going to have to pay for their candidates? That's a huge amount of money. In fact, many people are not aware that district assembly elections cost about 3 times presidential and parliamentary elections. It's the most expensive elections. Because presidential election, the whole country is one constituency. So only one plate is done, taken everywhere. Parliamentary elections, 275, that's all. District assembly, about 7,000 electoral areas and about 7,000 units. So we have to make 14,000 plates. All the candidates, you have to pay for them, do their posters, etc., etc. So the cost element alone in making the assembly system partisan is the first thing that must be addressed before you say you are going to a referendum. And when this was explained to the other parties, suddenly it struck them that they would not be able to bear that cost. Unless there was agreement that the government would continue to fund partisan district assembly. I could go on and on. There are many, many other things, but this is just an example. The reason why it is important for a consensus to be reached on decentralization implementation. Because the problem with decentralization is that you are moving power from where it is.
The top.
From the top, where people have been enjoying power. You are moving that power
Down.
and relocating it down there. And it is not a movement that is very easily undertaken at all.
I get you. So, Prof, we have to take our second break, and when we come back, we'll finish the discussion. Well, you're still watching Legends of Our Time on GBC News and Ghana Television. Today, we are privileged enough to have the man behind Ghana's decentralization drive, Professor Kwamena Ahwoi, and we're talking extensively about the topic and other issues that he's done over the years. My name is Gifty AJ. I'll take another break. When we come back, we'll conclude the interview. Please don't go. It's still Legends of Our Time on GBC News and Ghana Television. On Legends of Our Time, like always, we talk to our gems, and today we have one such encounter. My guest is Professor Kwamena Ahwoi, the decentralization man. My name is Gifty AJ. I'll go back to him and then we'll conclude this discussion. Prof, still privileged to be talking to you. Your achievements are so much that my time is limited to But let's quickly see what we can do. You know, so during the PNDC government, you became the local government secretary. And then beyond that, you also held other positions like in the Foreign Affairs Secretary, Information Ministry, Sports, Interior, Environment and Science, lands and natural resources, and then finally planning, regional cooperation and integration. I must say you were one such lucky person to be holding all these positions. What is it with you that made your boss like you so much to be given all these opportunities to, to prove yourself as a person?
Thank you very much. I think you have used the right word. Chairman, later President Rollins, had a lot of trust, a lot of faith in me. I don't really know why, but I believe he realized that I was a very hard worker. I achieved results. I don't complain a lot. I don't complain with my tools. When you give me a task, I'll find the tools with which to execute the task. So I believe when he assigned me a task, he could sleep in peace. And so very often when any vacancy occurred in any of the sectors, he preferred for me to act in those positions. So many of those positions that you have mentioned are all acting positions. It was a foreign ministry that in 1997, during his second term as president, he decided that I should combine the foreign ministry with a local government for some time, because Dr. Ahwoi, who used to be the Minister of Foreign Affairs, had been moved to Attorney General's department, and President Rollins had not quite decided on who to assign the foreign ministry to. So I was there for about a year and a half, about a year. One of the major achievements I chalked was that I attended the CHOGM, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting with President Rollins in Edinburgh, Scotland. And I was appointed to a 9-member committee that was called the CMAG, CMAG standing for Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group, which was a body set up by the Commonwealth to ensure the compliance of member states with the democratic practices. I also attended other conferences with him and that. And then in 2000, I was moved from local government full-time to set up a new ministry, the Ministry of Planning, Regional Economic Cooperation and Integration. That, he explained to me, was done because he and President Obasanjo of Nigeria at the time had agreed at a conference to spearhead ECOWAS integration, because they realized that the Francophones, who are, of course, in the majority in ECOWAS, were more concentrated on their Francophone community than on ECOWAS. So he told me that President Obasanjo had appointed one of his most trusted ministers, called Professor Jerry Ghana, to be in charge of regional integration, and he had told Obasanjo that he would appoint me as one of his trusted ministers to also be in charge. So he moved me there, and within that year, that was the year within which we were able to establish the ECOWAS Parliament, the ECOWAS Court of Justice, and several other ECOWAS institutions which had been on the drawing board since ECOWAS was founded in 1975, but which had never seen implementation. 2000 was the year in which we were able to do all of those things. So what I'm saying is that it was a trust that President Rollins had in me that allowed him to assign so much of his responsibilities to me.
Okay. You also got the opportunity to work with former President Professor Mills. I mean, in your eyes, who was he?
I didn't really work with him in an official capacity. I didn't hold any official position. But he appointed me to a number of his task forces. For example, he He formed a decentralization review committee. He made me the chairman. He put together a legislative review task force on decentralization. He made me the chairman. And then there was a third body, all of which he made me chairman. I had known Professor Mills before he got into government. He actually taught me in my first year at the Faculty of Law. In my second year, he taught me both commercial law and company law. So I knew him quite well. And then when I became a lecturer in the faculty, he was there, so we became colleagues. And then in 1996, I was the one who advised President Rollins to bring him into his government. So when he came, I was like the person that he knew the best in the government. So we were very close. And at that time, he was vice president, and I was minister of local government, for a short time, minister of foreign affairs. So we worked very well. He was a good man. I don't think politics was his strongest point. But once he got involved, he was able to make it a very strong point of his. He wasn't your typical African politician. He was too forgiving. He was too peace-loving, and he was, he thought that he had a good nature. So he thought every human being also had a good nature, which was one of his undoing. But I must say that he introduced a lot of professionalism into Ghanaian politics. President Rollins put him in charge of the technocracy, and it made all the ministries sit up. The chief directors looked up to him. He was an expert in company law and in taxation, which are the two areas where most of the nation's revenue comes from. And therefore, he touched base with almost all of them. All in all, I think that he was an effective president when he became a president. He was an effective president, but he also came under a lot of pressure. Because, as I said, he was not your typical politician, and therefore he would not do things that people would expect a typical politician to do. And that got him into trouble, even with his own party members.
That's interesting. Let's look at your one other strength that has to do with political transitions. Of course, you were part of the Ghana's transition from military rule to civilian rule. What exactly do you do, or what is it? Share with us. What goes behind
the indemnity clauses? Okay. For example, it was very hard. It's true, I was part of the transition arena at the time. It was very hard convincing the leaders of the committees of the Consultative Assembly to accept the indemnity clauses. But we explained to them the way I have explained to you, that look, don't assume that the people who stay the coup want to commit political suicide or even want to commit suicide. Because if you don't give them the guarantees, if you don't provide the indemnity, you are actually letting them out there to hang. And we don't think that it is going to be easy for them to do that. So that's one of the things that we done behind the scenes. So sometimes when people say that the indemnity clauses were not passed by the Consultative Assembly, it is true. It was negotiated between the PNDC transition team and the chairman of the committees of the Consultative Assembly. We had been in military rule for 10 years. So many of the democratic institutions had fallen into abeyance. Yeah. We had to bring them alive. For example, I chaired the committee on the legislature because we had to look at that time. The old Parliament House was out of use. We had to look for a new place for Parliament to sit. That's how we moved them into the State House. There were certain laws that the Constitution required to be passed within 6 months of the Constitution coming into force. So we had to put together teams to work on those laws. I was in charge of that assignment. The Scratch Law, the Electoral Commission Law, the NCC Law, the National Media Commission Law, the District Assembly's Common Fund Law, and the sixth one. All of them, we had to do this during the transition period. We had to look about how to resettle the organs of the revolution. You know, many organs had sprung up in support of the revolution, which were going to be phased out under constitutional rule. The militia, the public tribunals, the CDOs, there are several, quite a number of them. So we also had to work behind the scenes to ensure that they would not be so upset with the new system that they would work to disorganize it. Especially, in a sense, quite a number of these organizations had been put under arms and trained in the use of arms. Remember, we had something that we call democratization of violence. And all that language had to stop. The personnel had to be resettled somehow, and all of this were part of the transition things that we had to do in order that we made a smooth transition. I was also very much a part of the 2001 transition, from Rawlings to Kuffour. That was also a very difficult transition because even 93 transition was not too bad because it was from PNDC to NDC. So it was like from me to myself.
Yes.
But 2001 was the first time in the post-independence history of Ghana that a government formed by one party was handing over power to a government formed by a different political party. There was no constitutional provision to cover that situation. There was no law to cover that situation. There was no convention to cover that situation. There was no precedent to cover that situation.
So how did you do it?
It was very, very difficult. In fact, it was a very confusing transition. Many things happened, some of which I have documented in some of my...
Give us a gist.
Oh, you know, the whole idea of handing over, you are a Fanti, so you understand. You know, in Fanti, there is a difference, or in Akan, there's a difference between ye two abain and a yasasa abain. The only president we had in Ghana was ye two abain. Both words translate in English into change. We have changed the government. But ye two abain, no, there is an
emphasis.
So that's why you put people in jail, you seize their cars, you do all kinds of things. Yasasa abain.
Continuity.
Continuity. The only president we had in Ghana at the time was Yetu Abai, because governments had always been changed by coup d'etats. And therefore, the attitude that the new government and its supporters came into government
was difficult to work with.
Yetu Abai, give us your cars, you have stolen this, you've done this. You know, so it was not an easy situation at all. But out of that situation, or out of that experience, we learned some lessons, and so we started working towards a presidential transition act. You know, myself, Nana Todadi, the late Justice V.C.R.A. Sikap, were the three people. V.C.R.A. Sikap, he chaired it. We finally were tasked to put together a draft bill, which we did, which eventually became the Presidential Transition Act of 2012. Act 845.
Okay.
That is what has made the transition. That's what made the 2016 transition a bit better than 2001 and 2009. Because 2001 was repeated. You know, this time with the NPP on the receiving end, you know, and the NDC as the the victors. You know, but it was not as bad as in 2001. But it was bad. You know. So at least now we have a framework for managing our transitions, and I am glad that I played a key role in the preparation of that framework.
I'm also interested in this 5-member presidential committee that was set up in 2015-2016 under Article 71 of Ghana's Constitution to determine the salaries and other emoluments of the president and members of the executive, Speaker of Parliament, members of the MPs. Chief Justice and then the Supreme Courts of Adjudicature, and Superior Court of Adjudicature, and was a big issue in Ghana. You think you did a good job with that?
Yes, we had a very fascinating chairperson, chairwoman, Professor Doraidu Bwando. She's currently the Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Coast. She was a very disciplined lady who knew what she was about, and she managed to steer us in the right direction. It was a very, very successful committee, because that is the only, well, apart from the first committee that was set up by President Rawlings in 1996, the Green Street Committee. This is the only committee whose report did not give rise to any agitations. You remember President Kufuor's committee, Mrs. Mary Chinwehesi. That one was so controversial. President Mills had to set up a review committee under Ishmael Yamson to review the work that she did. This one was accepted in good faith, and it didn't really lead to any controversy at all. I think that the membership was also very carefully considered. Apart from Professor Dubwando and myself, there was one doctor now, Professor Bang Wating. He's a labor statistician with the economics department of the University of Ghana. Then there was Madam Lydia Power. She was in charge of the National Insurance Commission. And then there was a fifth lady, I've forgotten the name. They were all very conscientious persons, and I think that we did a good job.
We have to be rounding up at let's look at your which one
yes,
put the focus.
Yes, let me just say that one of my personal satisfaction in being in government is that it has enabled me, since I left government, to do a lot of publications which reflect not only the theoretical perspective but also my experiences in government. I wrote a book which we call In the Service of Democracy, a biography of Justice D.F. Annan, who was the Speaker of the First and Second Parliaments of the Fourth Republic. I wrote it in collaboration with Nana Atodati. Then I did local government and decentralization in Ghana in 2010. I did a second edition, I think 3 years ago. And I did decentralization in Ghana, a collection of essays. Then I did, 2 years ago, I did decentralization reforms in Ghana, the experiences of the 5th and 6th governments of the Fourth Republic. I did that in collaboration with Dr. Kalistus Mahama, who was the head of the local government service, President Mahama. Then I have done one on the biography of President Mills with Kokwenyi Doho, which is with the printers. And the latest one, which will be launched next week, Thursday, is on my experiences with President Rawlings, which I call Working with Rawlings, which, if you can take a shot of it, I've had with me since the beginning of the interview. It is not a biography of President Rawlings. It is not my autobiography. It's not a story about PNDC. It's not a story about NDC. It's a story about my working relationships with President Rawlings and some of the lessons that present-day politicians and future politicians can learn from working at the highest level, and especially ministers can learn from working at the highest level with the head of state. As you know, I worked with President Rawlings for 19 years, and it was an experience that you cannot buy in any shop or read from it.
I have a question to ask, but I'll shelve it. So from all your experiences in a line or two, what is politics to you?
Basically, it is about the allocation of resources. A country has resources, it has people. Who gets what and in what quantities. Basically, that's what it's about. If you're a good politician, you also allocate the resources that as many people as possible will be satisfied. you are a bad politician, you allocate it to yourself, your family, your friends, etc., and then there will be a lot of dissatisfaction in the country.
So now, crossing carpet from the classroom into politics, do you sometimes miss the classroom, or I mean, have you regretted that decision?
From politics, I went back to the classroom.
Okay.
Because from 2005 to 2016, for 11 years, I was lecturing at GIMPA full time. As I was lecturing in the School of Governance and Leadership, and I was also, in fact, I set up the Faculty of Law at GIMPA. So I was also lecturing at the Faculty of Law at GIMPA. If I were to be born again and I had a choice between academia and politics, it's a very, very simple choice. I'll go for academia.
Why?
It's peaceful.
Oh, but politics gives you a lot of exposure.
Yes, it does.
Money, fame.
Well, it depends. I mean, if your objective is not money, politics is not very interesting. Politics gives you experience. It enables you to contribute, because at the end of the day, policy is what moves a country. And when you are in politics, you are involved in policy, and therefore, and also allocation of resources. So you can serve your country better, and also on a grander scale. In academia, you have a smaller constituency to deal with. But the reason for
your choice.
My choice is that I don't like the intrigues that go on in politics. You spend a lot more time dealing with intrigues than actually concentrating on the job for which you have been elected or your party has been elected. In academia, you are focused. You have an area, you concentrate on it, you research. If you do well, you get satisfaction.
Professor Kwamena Ahwoi, are you a fulfilled person?
Am I?
A fulfilled
person? Yes, I am, especially in my private life. Because I have a very good wife who has made it possible for me to do all of the things.
Thumbs up, ma.
I have 3 daughters who have also become women. You know, 2 of them are married with their husbands in the U.S. The last one is a lawyer who is working with the Attorney General's department. I have a son who is not my wife's child, but who has been integrated into the household, who lives in the UK. So looking at them and the way they have developed themselves, I am very, very happy. I have come forth and multiplied, as the
Bible says.
The Bible told us to do. And in multiplying, I have also added quality to humanity.
Sure. So currently you're on pension. What do you do? What are you into?
I spend most of my time on consultancies. I get a few external consultancies from time to time. I'm doing a lot of writing, and I do a lot of unpaid work for the NDC. In fact, the unpaid work for the NDC, I think takes the greater part of my time, and these other matters.
Before we round up, is there something that you don't want to share with us? It could be anything. I mean, it could be observation, statement, something that you feel strongly about that you'd want to share with us.
Yes, Ghanaians have coined a word or a phrase, the monetization of politics. It really worries me. It really, really, really worries me. Because when we were entering the Fourth Republic, we were very careful to craft a constitution and a political parties law that was going to make it difficult for politics to be monetized. And that's why we put in provisions like there can be no foreign contribution to a political party in Ghana. Even corporate bodies were prohibited from contributing to political parties, and individuals could not contribute more than a certain amount to political parties. All that has changed now, and as we have seen from the primaries of both parties and from the elections themselves, politics is now for the highest bidder. And I think that is really, really, really a shame, because when you get that, you don't get the best.
That's interesting to know. Prof. Kwamena Ahwoi, how do you want to be remembered many years to come?
The man who was a member of the team in the decade that stopped the decay and continued to help shape the politics of the Fourth Republic. That's how I want to remember.
Thank you so much for your time. I wish I can shake your hand, but this new normal.
You can do this. Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. It was a pleasure talking to you. And we are grateful. Well, so this is how we wrap up on today's edition of your program, Legends of Our Time, on GBC News and Ghana Television. On Legends of Our Time, like always, we celebrate our heroes. And of course, one of the gems this country has produced is Professor Kwamena Ahwoi, and he was my guest on the show for today. My name is Gifty AJ. Thank you so much for watching. We'll come your way same time, God willing, next week. Until then,